The SCP Foundation handles all kinds of anomalies and abnormalities, from horrors beyond thought to the most simple cryptids. It goes without saying that ghosts are included. After all, every culture has stories about ghosts, spirits, and hauntings. But your average poltergeists are nothing special to the hardened agents and researchers of the Foundation. They've seen so many that there have been studies written on their behavior. What could possibly still be scary about them? In 1999, the Foundation found out that the only thing more terrifying than a ghost is the absence of one. But let's go back in time a little. Way back in 1961, the Foundation were informed of a little town in the Mississippi backwoods called Pollensbee, allegedly a hotspot for all sorts of anomalies. The town was mostly owned by the Burnley family, a long lineage of magicians, occultists, and alchemists in the Deep South. Their power so notable, even the Foundation of yesteryear decided that they were better left alone. After conducting some cursory reconnaissance on the famous patriarch of the family, a heroisographer named Lyle Allen Burnley, and the ancestral estate of Elaline, the Foundation decided to leave Pollensbee for another day. That day came in 1978. Lyle Allen Burnley died, and the estate passed into the hands of the municipal government. That's where the Foundation stepped in. They had heard lots of stories from frightened tourists of Elaline being haunted, of the land being cursed. They took ownership and, to their shock, found that these weren't just the ravings of spooked travelers. Elaline really was haunted, but these ghosts weren't hateful or malicious. They were barely even significant enough to be worth containment, so the Foundation decided not to waste their resources on containing an entire estate. They cut a deal with the surviving Burnleys. So long as they made sure the revenants of Burnley Manor stayed in line, the Foundation wouldn't bother them. This worked great, all the way until the fateful year of 1999. None of the Burnleys remained in the dilapidated mansion anymore, and the Foundation began receiving reports of a new anomaly, classified as SCP-6274. The ghosts of the Burnley Estate were lashing out, and then disappearing, defying the Foundation's understanding of how ghosts work. An excerpt written by Lyle Allen Burnley regarding the haunting says, "No two hauntings are quite alike, though they share some common properties. Let us dispel the notion that all are translucent people wandering around after dark to scare children. A revenant can take any number of forms, from a phenomenon to a place. While I cannot speak for all of them, those that I encountered in my home life at the estate were universally positive and helpful to a fault. The most universal property being that they do not leave. The occultists of yore thought that the spirits could be banished or exorcised. They were incorrect. In the decades since society learned of their existence, methods have been proposed and tested to permanently remove them. All are prohibitively expensive, and none have ever worked. At best, their actions can be temporarily dampened, but they will never go away." A crew from MTF Mew-13 were sent into Elaline to investigate the situation. They entered to find the entire sprawling mansion without power and in disrepair, the paint peeling and the roofs collapsing. They advanced through the building, putting down surveillance cameras and microphones, trying to find the status of the ghosts. They find a door to the wine cellar that, against all force, just won't open. Behind it, the sounds of breathing. With no choice, they draw a rune on the door and leave, finding a dining hall filled with rotten food. On their way back, the rune had been erased. They reassure themselves that there was nothing to be afraid of and continue into the main hall. That's when it hits them. The ghosts of Elaline are awake. They see horrifying apparitions on their way through to the other wing of the mansion, where many of the doors are barred from the inside. The one that isn't contains a fancy covered bed and dozens of candles covering every surface. Somehow, they don't realize one of them has gone missing. Then something happens. Something bad. The entire section of the documentation is expunged. When it clears up, 2 agents are reported waking up in the garden, holding a book and looking at a tree growing around a human body. They rush back into the house and into the kitchen, but the house has changed from the inside. They find the body of the absent agent and a single finger coming from the bottom of the sealed door. The documentation expunges itself just as the surviving agent arms herself. When it ends, all there is left to do is for the agent's body to be recovered hours later from the porch, along with the book. The sacrifice of the agents lets the Foundation discover a few things. The dining room, the bedroom, and the tree are the sites of Eileen's last ghosts. The feast, the brood, and the totem. The book seems to be a diary written by Mr. Burnley, recording all the ghosts of the manor and their history, and dedicated to his 4 children. The Foundation prepares one of their mediums. They must commune with the ghosts of Eileen. First comes the feast. The feast is an entity inhabiting the Silverton dining room, among the most docile of those that inhabit our home. As a boy, it was a favorite plaything. As a young man, an endless source of amazement for the ladies of the town when they came up to the manor. As an older man, a close confidant, for when one wishes to shut out the troubles of the world with food and drink without conversation. It is an arrangement of delicacies and perfectly cooked meats with aged wines and all manner of side dishes. Roasted ham, seared steaks, cooked goose, and veal. The exact contents change regularly. I remember Arthur and I at breakfast, making a game of guessing what would be on the table by nightfall. He adored the room nearly as much as I. Like many other revenants in Eileen, it seeks only to live in happy coexistence with the current generation of Burnleys inhabiting the home. For the feast, this means providing delicious food and the enjoyment that comes from a full belly. After much time in the family's archives in the library, I ventured forth a guess that the feast was once Abraham Burnley, a noted gastronome and gourmet, dead in 1845. I've had little luck in communing with him in the usual method. It seems he is happy to limit his interaction with the world to one's taste buds. The feast is a food-based revenant. Despite Mr. Burnley's claims, all it produces now is rotten, maggot-ridden food filled with razor blades, shrapnel, and bugs. The Foundation's medium, known only as Z, sits down and begins the ritual in the dining room. Her cries are met with small shifts, a plate moving, meat falling apart, a breeze. Suddenly she announces to her guards that something is wrong, that there is no ghost. An impossibly old voice speaks through her and to her. It tells her, "There is no spirit to be found here. Only absences. Only nothing. There is nothing to be afraid of in the dark." Then, in a whisper, that the cellar can only be opened by the masters of the house. Then the ritual breaks, and all parties look to the table, where there are hundreds of glasses of a dark wine. Since then, the feast hasn't shown any activity. A misconception that ghosts, spirits, revenants, whatever you choose to call them, are utterly and totally divorced from the world which we inhabit. That their interaction is limited to that of a common poltergeist. Throwing vases and banging together pots and pans like a choleric child. Not so. Revenants are not altogether unlike living humans. They feel emotion. They are driven by something, though they do not know what. One could say this goes for most all creatures. They rage when they are upset, when they are angry, bitter, frightened of something. A wise man I met in Jordan some years ago told me that every revenant is anchored by something in the living world, be it a person, an object, a location, something that they left behind. When this anchor is removed, the revenant ceases to exist. What remains is something else. Then comes the brood. As a child, I was warned against going into the bedroom in the western wing. We all knew the one. It was never locked. Burnleys do not believe in stifling exploration, but I was told quite sternly by my father that I would be solely and entirely responsible for what I found inside. Decades later, I told Matilda the same thing when she asked what was inside. Naturally, it stopped neither of us. None of the revenants in Burnley Manor are dangerous, but a fair few simply wish to be left alone. The brood is one of these. I have no idea how old it is. I've asked everyone and searched to the bottom of the archives, but no one seems to know where it came from. Presumably, it does not predate the creation of the Western Wing itself in 1798, but who can say for certain? The brood takes the form of a woman in the throes of childbirth in her bedchambers. She screams, cries, and generally spurns visitors, reasonably enough. The curtains open for only a few seconds, but in those seconds, any questions you ask the poor thing are answered with all the truth of the universe. My father was right. Knowledge is not a burden a child should bear. Not a day goes by where I do not remember Matilda weeping as she hugged me. All the brood does now is sit inside the impenetrable bed, constantly softly weeping and occasionally throwing an object from inside the curtains, though never daring to open them. Z navigates through the candles and kneels by the foot of the bed, requesting an audience, only to be met with a flung baby rattle and a woman's soft voice asking who's there, demanding where her family has gone, and begging for help, because nothing's coming out. Before Z can even respond, the woman inside the bed screams for her to get the gun. Then the room goes completely dark. The same ancient voice speaks from behind the curtains. It informs her that she wastes her time with ghosts of ghosts while Burnley Manor is eaten around her. What has killed the ghosts of Eileen? Impossible as it may be. And what does a ghost leave behind when killed? Once again, just as Z gets her wits, the spell is broken and the curtains of the bed open, revealing a burned corpse huddled under the sheets. The brood, too, has fallen silent. The Burnley ghosts are like no other. Haunted manors are a dime a dozen. Revenants angry that they have been forgotten by the world, acting out in crowd of unknown fools furthering their suffering. A tragic story by any angle. But here, our ghosts are not unknowns, forgotten by the world. They are remembered. Burnleys do not shy away from our ghosts. We approach them with open arms. They may not be of this mortal coil, but they are still family. And family is the most important thing. Family is what we leave behind in this world, our legacy and our mark. We also leave behind our spirits, our revenants. This book is a collection of the ghosts of Burnley Manor and the place they hold in our family. The family is the anchor for all of them. I do not like to imagine a world in which that anchor no longer exists, and so I shall not. But when I walk the grounds at night, my children have all but gone. I realize I may very well be the last Burnley. Without me, what will happen to this place? The memories I have forged here with my children. My place is to remember what my ancestors have left behind. What will I leave behind? And finally, the totem. The totem is a strange thing. I remember long afternoons spent running through the gardens with my brothers and sisters. The groundskeeper hated us, how we would ruin his perfectly tended shrubs, and we'd be called in for dinner by the maid and wolfed down the feast, before spending the evening lounging beneath the totem. My grandfather sat me on his lap and told me its story one day. His own granduncle had done a service for the Indians that still dominated our land back then. The specifics of the service are unclear to me, but it was great enough that when he died, they paid their debt and he came back as a sapling in the grounds of the garden that he loved so much. The fruit he produced were one of a kind, a large round thing the size of your fist with a thick purple skin and a juicy red inside. He was our oldest family member. We adored his stories, regaling us with cowboy tales, and he was a tree in spirit, happy to watch the world grow around him. The third ghost of Eileen sits on the far edge of the gardens, closed off in its own little pen. The trunk of the tree intertwined with that of a man, his arm reaching out like a branch before being swallowed up by the wood growing around him again. The roots and vines have been seen strangling and choking unwary animals and personnel, dragging them into the corrosive soil for digestion. As such, Z's communications were performed from a small drone. To everyone's surprise, the totem speaks, affirming he was once a Burnley, but is now only a hole, a gap in the shape of a Burnley. Not unlike the rest of the house, once it was filled with the ghosts and revenants of old members of the Burnley clan, but something happened. The totem speaks, but its voice ages into oblivion. something cosmic turned its eyes on a family in Mississippi, leaving behind nothingness in its wake.
I was looking through my archives just the other day when I came across an old journal of mine from an expedition into the Iron Eye. They have a rich and ancient culture, and as with all cultures, the aspect of mysticism and spirituality was strong. I shared my knowledge of certain histories and heresies, and was provided with their own stories in turn. One story was of a man whose father had been killed in battle. He was told by a shaman that his father's spirit, his revenant, was watching over him, and would continue to do so for his son and his son's son, and so on. He was comforted by this knowledge. Many years later, the man was subject to a curse from a rival house, something to plague misfortunes upon his family. In those weeks, he felt a presence by his side, one he did not even realize was there. Change, morph something to nothing, like a black hole on his shoulder, constantly pulling. The unignorable presence of nothingness. The shaman told him plainly, his father's spirit was no longer the thing walking behind his side. It troubles me. I've seen what my forefathers have left behind. I leave behind 4 wonderful children and 2 wives. I leave behind a body of work as impressive as any scholar of the paranormal. But my children have no interest in the occult. The family secrets will die with me. Whatever I leave behind will be a harbinger of things to come.
Just as the Foundation prepared to give up the investigation, with all 3 revenants lying indefinitely dormant, a stroke of luck changed everything. The Foundation was approached by a civilian, Laura Norman, once known as Laura Burnley, disowned by her father in the very same will that left the house to the city. Agreeing to speak with a researcher, she affirmed that she had tried to avoid her family's legacy and had not seen the house in years. The house being haunted was just a simple fact of life, not something for the Burnley kids to worry about, but instead housemates and childhood confidants. Then she is told that against all logic, the ghosts of Burnley Manor have been corrupted and killed, and that everything her father had written and disowned her to free her from points to whatever killed them being in the wine cellar underneath the house. Laura is in disbelief, not least because the house does not have a wine cellar. She agrees to open the door that does not exist, but before she does, the Foundation discovers 3 corpses buried in the grounds away from the house, those of Henry, Arthur, and Matilda Burnley, Laura's sibling, dead for only a few months. As Laura prepares to descend, the finger beneath the door pulls itself back in. Laura steps into the dark stairwell, searching pointlessly for a light against the wall. As she goes down the stairs descending into the inky blackness, Laura tells the handler that there was a cellar under the house once. As a child, her father took her down into a cavernous empty space and told her he would build a wine cellar there one day. Then she arrives at the bottom, discovering nothing. Not just an empty space, but truly nothing. The cellar is an endless abyss. As she stares out into the void, the realization hits her. There is no wine cellar. There are no ghosts. Merely the spaces and outlines where they should be. Something has consumed the Burnley Manor. And the last thing the researchers hear before her microphone cuts out is an ancient voice behind her, assuring her there is nothing to be afraid of. And her response, "Dad?" Now go check out SCP-2696 Haunted Victorian Mansion and SCP-4153 Haunted House Horror It Came from Site 9 for more anomalously chilling haunted house locations.